Hello and welcome to the Tips with Toni podcast. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time. I'm very excited for you to hear this next interview. I have virtually in front of me Jennifer Anderson. She is a registered dietitian with a huge social media platform who really helps parents who have kids who are picky eaters and really teaches them how to embrace kind of all foods and to really find balance in their eating habits, which is so aligned with what I do. So I'm super excited to have Jennifer here. Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Toni. It's great to be here.
Yeah, you're so welcome. So the first question I always ask my guests is to introduce yourself by sharing who you are, what you do, and most importantly, why you do what you do.
Yeah, so my name is Jennifer Anderson. I'm a registered dietitian, mom of two exciting boys, and cheerleader to hundreds of thousands and millions of parents feeding kids all over the world. I do what I do because I was and am a parent who struggles with feeding my kids. It's tricky. It's a lot harder than I ever imagined. And there was one day where I was standing in my kitchen and I thought, you know what? I can't be the only person struggling with this. And shortly after that, I started an Instagram account and I learned, indeed, I am not the only parent struggling feeding kids. And that's what I do to reduce that stress and to help parents get their kids eating better.
Definitely. And it's so great that you are vulnerable and honest about the fact that you still struggle with it because it's not an easy task, you know,
my gosh. And
especially in today's world. Yeah. And the pandemic and, one post you put the other day, I thought was great. Like if you're tired or you're depressed or just having a bad day, what can you give your kids? Sometimes you don't want to cook, especially in the pandemic. Like we've been cooking constantly. And I know I work with a lot of moms or parents basically who are the ones that are doing the cooking for the kids. And it used to be that they just had to pack their lunch and they made them dinner, but now they have to have breakfast, snacks, lunch, and dinner. They're all with them. And it's a lot. It's like really, really exhausting and really tiring. So I can't even imagine,
Yeah, it is. It'll run you into the ground. But the thing is, even if you get run into the ground, you still have to keep feeding them.
Right. Exactly. It's not something you could just not do or, right. Feel like, you got to feed that. You got to feed that. So let's maybe start with I guess just that. I guess what I'm hearing from a lot of parents is just these conflicting messages of like, what's a healthy snack or are my kids eating enough? Like, how do you kind of guarantee that your child or when you're teaching someone about how to feed their kids that they're getting all like the nutrients that they need? Like, is there a way to tell that they're eating enough or getting enough balance? Like, how do you?
Yeah. So when we're looking at, is a child eating enough or eating the right amount for their body, whatever their body size is? We really look at is actually growth charts. So a lot of this happens in the pediatrician's office because the pediatrician can look at the growth trajectory of the child. Where did they start when they were born? Where did they kind of end up when they were toddlers? How has their growth gone over time? That's what we look at. And when a child is not getting enough to eat, that's often the place that it will show up and the pediatrician will have a flag. Now, of course, there are some times when the pediatrician has a flag, but then doesn't know what to do with it. And then parents are often saying things like, oh my gosh, the pediatrician told me to put my kid on a diet. Oh my gosh, the pediatrician told me to just feed my child ice cream to get them back on the growth chart. So the pediatrician is a great place to start with these conversations like, how is my child growing? But they're not, if your pediatrician says something after that, where your gut is like, that doesn't sound right. No, I don't want you telling my child that they are fat in front of them, which happens. Then you need to look for another solution because pediatricians are not trained in nutrition. And while some may have gone on to further study in that area, most haven't. And they're not dietitians. This isn't their area of specialty. And so they may be speaking out of bias and stigma against weight or against this or that or the other thing. And they really don't know what to say. So find a dietitian if you think your child has a growth issue. But here's the thing, most kids eat a good amount for their body to actually, grow and thrive and do all those things. Most kids do. Now, I'm one of those parents who had a kid who kind of fell off the growth chart It is a very stressful experience. And it's really hard. And that's where you have to sometimes change what you serve in the house or something like that to help them thrive. The other thing is, though, a lot of times as parents, we fixate on how much our child is eating. That is a product of the diet culture that just swirls around us. Portion sizes, calories, burning energy, fueling our bodies, all these things. This is all from diet culture. And we just automatically think, oh my gosh, I have to feed my child the right portion for their body. Otherwise, they're going to get sick, or they're not going to grow, or they're going to grow too much, or you name it. The thing is, that's not how anybody uses energy or eats or anything else. And you'll find if you have a child, one day they're going to eat 3 bites of food and you're going to freak out. And you're going to think, oh my gosh, my child is starving to death. Then 2 days later, they're going to eat as much as you. And then you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that's way too much food. They're going to become unhealthy, or they're going to gain weight and become unhealthy, or whatever. You're going to have all these sorts of thoughts, none of which are very helpful in this case, because kids are going to vary how much they eat day to day. And that's exactly what we want them to do. And you know, maybe you have a child who just eats a ton of food because they have a fast metabolism, or you have a kid who eats hardly any food and they still grow and thrive. Because I don't know, I have one of those kids and I'm just like, how are you growing based on what you're eating? I don't know. That doesn't add up to me, but I see it, right? So I think we need to step back and not fixate so much on how much our kids are eating day to day, but look, did they eat a variety over the course of the week, of the month? And if that's the case, then we can just kind of keep tabs on their growth with the pediatrician, but also we don't have to worry.
Right. That's a really good point. And I think that's also a lesson for just adults that I think that are trying to follow like very restrictive meal plans that are like, you know, the same amount of calories every day. And like, then they don't always hit it. They go under, they go over, they feel bad about it. It's like, that's normal. It's normal for you to be hungrier some days. And, you know, it could be based off your activity level. It could be based off of your sleep. There's just so many things that affect that. And yeah, kids are exactly the same. So, okay. So I want to go a little bit back to kind of that commentary by a doctor or by a pediatrician that might kind of recommend, okay, your child's not growing fast enough or not thriving, so we need to feed them more. And they might recommend just like give them all the ice cream, right? And then you said we also have, and this one unfortunately is more common than not. And I have a lot of people that come and reach out to me and that say that their pediatrician told their child that they're, in the higher percentile for their weight, and that we need to start like restricting how much snacks we give them. And then from that, a lot of parents will actually like hide the snacks from their kids. They'll like have, it's like, they're not allowed to go in this cabinet, only if I say so. Like, can you maybe speak to how do you handle the one side, if your kid's maybe not thriving, and ways to help them grow by feeding them more with maybe more variety and balance, and like not just giving them ice cream. And then the other side of like, just because somebody is above the certain percentile, that doesn't mean you never let them have any ice cream. Am I making sense?
There's just been a real tragedy that the focus has shifted so much to weight instead of health. Weight is something that just is. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be unhealthy. It doesn't mean you're going to be to the high or low side, right? It doesn't mean that you can't be healthy. It doesn't mean that you have a disease, like all these things. And unfortunately, doctors have incredibly, and this has been researched and written about in peer-reviewed journals, that doctors have very high levels of stigma against larger body people. And they don't provide actual health care in those situations. They just kind of blame it all on whatever the person in the size is. Another thing we have to keep in mind is this idea that we've been fed that we have complete control over the size of our body. Really, my reading of the literature doesn't support that idea very well, that we can completely control our body. I think it's mostly controlled, not to say we don't have any role in our body, which we do, but a lot of it is controlled by the environment. What food do we have access to? What time do we have access to? What resources, what family help, what social support, what mental health do we have? There's so many things that play into our ability to kind of eat the amount of food that would support our original genetics as far as size goes. So I always like to start the conversation there, because for a pediatrician to say you need to put your child on a diet or you need to restrict food, they are focusing on weight, not on their health, not on their actual health. So, you know, if your child has, if you walk into the pediatrician and the doctor says your child has high cholesterol, really important that you meet with a dietitian, you address their high cholesterol. Now, will their weight be affected by you addressing the high cholesterol? It might not. I don't know, but you do need to address that high cholesterol, right? Does your child have pre-diabetes? Again, really important that you step in right away and address that issue. And again, by addressing that issue, weight may or may not be affected, but you are addressing that issue with lifestyle things. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, as far as like, what are you going to do at home? Your doctor says, oh, your child is at a high BMI, and I want you to restrict their carbs. That is something that I commonly hear. Yeah. I want you to restrict their carbs. Like, what does that mean? Should I not give my child apples? As a dietitian, I always get really concerned about that. Like, people don't know what carbs are. Kids need carbohydrates to grow and thrive and do all those things. I'm often asked, one time I was asked if it was the healthiest thing to wean a baby to a keto diet. I
think my heart just stopped. What?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
And I'm also seeing a lot of people saying, you know, what diet should I put my kid on? All this stuff. Anyway, I get like really worked up about it because it's so wrong that we're focusing on kids' weight instead of actually teaching them how to have a meaningful, healthy life. So that's nothing I say on my page ever is designed to try to change the shape of a child.
Right.
Because I think that puts all the attention on the wrong thing. There's so many things we could focus on. We could focus on, does everybody have access to food? That would be a great place to start, actually.
Right? To be grateful that you actually have food, because unfortunately people don't have that access.
Yeah, right. It's a huge problem in the United States. The other thing is we have to really be clear on whose job is what in our family. So as parents, it's our job to decide what foods our children are going to be given and to decide when they're going to eat, especially when they're younger. And a lot of my advice goes to like 0 to 10, but you know, there's some variation there. And then also where we're eating. It's our job to really show our kids how to have a balanced, healthy eating environment,
right?
Which means I serve balanced meals and snacks. It means I'm not just throwing a bag of potato chips at my kid in front of the TV saying, hey, you know, eat that. Now, there might be times where I might do that. You know, I actually, it was just funny because on the weekend, my kids did eat out of a bag of potato chips for like an hour. And you know what? I was grieving the loss of a friend who died to COVID. And you know what? Do you know how much I cared about my kids eating that bag of potato chips at the table?
Zero.
Because I was busy. I was very busy and I could not maintain that. So I was going to infuse some practicality here. You know, things happen. But what we're talking about is kind of the day-to-day, when as a parent you have some resources, you're not in a grieving process, you're not in a kind of like a survival mode. What are the you know, the habits that you're showing your kid? Well, in my house we eat at the table and we eat in the kitchen. It's non-negotiables for us. I will yell at the kids if they're eating in the living room, hopefully with a nice tone. We don't eat the bedroom. We don't eat like all these other places. We eat at the kitchen or at the table, right? That establishes a formality. Like when we eat intentionally. We don't just eat all the time. Also, we have breakfast, we have a morning snack, we have lunch, we have an afternoon snack, and then we have dinner. And in my family, because we have this growth issue, we have a bedtime snack. So So that's how it works. But the kids know, like, we're not eating all day. We don't just eat. We don't
There's
just go
structure
and eat food. Not to say my kids never do that, but like, that is what I'm enforcing. Like, we eat at times. And when we eat a balanced meal. So this is where the snacks come in. Often parents will just like provide goldfish crackers or whatever. But what we don't realize is when we just give kids like an easy cracker snack, we're missing the fat and the protein that would actually keep kids full for a longer time. So when a doctor says restrict their snacks, the doctor is missing the fact that their kid is going to be hungry in the afternoon after school, and they need a snack, but they really need a meal. They need, you know, a cheese stick, an apple, and some peanut butter or whatever. Even a cheese stick and an apple would probably be fine. But they need something substantial to get them to the next meal or snack. And otherwise, they're just going to keep eating crackers all the time because they're constantly going to be hungry.
Right. And honestly, once again, that is very similar to adults. That's what I recommend to a lot of my clients. It's that you're kind of running around all day, and then, yeah, maybe you have an apple, or you have, like, you know, a bag of chips or whatever. And like, yeah, that's fine. But then you're still going to be really hungry for dinner. And that's often when the overeating happens, right? Or the cravings come up, right? And if it's not well balanced, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to really, you know, stay engaged and honor your hunger cues.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see that a lot with kids. Like, you know, if your kid misses their snack, they may like flip out, and all of a sudden they're in the pantry trying to eat cookies or whatever. And you're thinking, oh my gosh, my kid is addicted to sugar. I have a lot of parents who say that. But the reality was they didn't eat their snack, or maybe you were like, I don't want you to have a snack. And now they're just eating whatever they can because they're, you know, they're super hungry. So you know, it doesn't matter what your age is.
No, yeah, definitely not. But I think the point is that if we could establish these healthy habits now and the structure now, then they probably won't have to struggle in the future with figuring out how to eat and dieting. And honestly, like, the world that we live in with diet culture that's, you know, running rampant, like, if they learn that now.
That's the ideal, right? We want to help give our kids the tools they need to go out into a diet culture and to eat competently and not kind of fall prey to it.
Right. So one thing that you do really well, I love some of the, like, your things on Instagram of really just like the language and like how to speak to kids if they request something, you know, or even just in general. I think that the way that we talk about food can be super helpful. Like, are there any certain kind of phrases or comments that you think that could be helpful? So for example, if a kid, you know, I guess this is a good one. Like, I think a lot of parents, I should say, will say, like, when you finish your dinner, then you can have your dessert. Do you think that that's a helpful language? Or do you think that is still putting kind of the dessert almost like as a pedestal? Like, I'm curious. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that.
For sure. I mean, when you say you have to eat your veggies to get dessert, you're saying veggies are bad, so bad that I have to bribe you to get them, to eat them, with this thing that is now being put higher on a pedestal. Most kids like sweet things, and they don't need sweets to be put on a pedestal. I mean, I think our biology often likes sweet things, so we don't need to put it further on a pedestal. And so when we say you can't eat your veggies until you get that, it does the opposite of what we hope. We want kids to eat less sweets and eat more veggies. That's what I find most parents want. And then every time we bribe them, it does the opposite. And then they want to eat veggies less and they want to eat dessert more. So I really just recommend not putting any requirements on dessert. And frankly, if your kid is obsessed about dessert to the fact that they can't eat their dinner, I recommend serving it on the plate, a small child-sized portion on the plate, with no comments from you. Just no comments, just having it there. Because then they're like, oh, well, this is all I can eat. And then they eat the cookie, but then they're still hungry. So they eat the rest of the food. Now, are there times that they'll just eat the cookie? Sure. But like 0.01% have my kids done that. Of all the times they have dessert alongside the other food on their plate. So
yeah, and I think the more consistent you are with giving them those 3 meals a day and snacks in between, and like giving them the opportunity, they're going to tend to eventually they're going to eat more than just the cookie, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, because the reality is if you served them, you know, lunch with the cookie and then they only ate the cookie, then they're going to get to, you know, 20 minutes later, they're going to say, hey, I'm hungry. And you're going to say, well, you know, it's not snack time, but we're going to have snack time, you know, in an hour. They're going to like be annoyed, right? And they're going to learn, oh, okay, you're not going to just feed me all the time, anytime I ever make a request for food. Like, this is a formal thing in our house.
Right.
And at snack time, of course, like at snack time, you can eat as much as you want. And they will fill up then at snack time. But, you know, they touch on really quickly to a healthy structure.
Right. And I think you do a really great job of the balance between like, there are no food rules. You can have whatever you want, whenever you want it, like, because of fear. And I think people come from a genuine place of fear of like, they struggled with being put on diets when they were a kid and they don't want that for their kids. So they now kind of maybe go the complete other way. Whereas then you have people that are, fear that their kids are going to get overweight because that's what they were body shamed. And so now they don't let them have any sweets at all. So I think you do a really great job finding that middle. And I think it's important for people to hear that you don't have to be, you could eat whatever you want, whenever you want it. And then you could also have to be like, no, you can't have any of that until you finish your dinner, or like being kind of really strict with the rules.
Yeah. I mean, we have to remember it's not our job to control our child's body size. Like, that is just not true. Now, I know as a parent whose child, was not gaining weight appropriately, I know how anxiety provoking that can be. It's a really strong feeling because we feel like we're responsible for our kid's body size. But in reality, we're not. We're only responsible for a child's environment. I can set the rules and I can say, you know what, we're going to have a balanced meal, because we know that the research shows that parents who just say, okay, whatever, whenever, when they do that, their kids are much more likely to not get the nutrients that they need and to be at a weight that actually isn't the best weight for that child based on their genetics. And so I can't, as a dietitian and somebody who relies on the evidence that we have to make recommendations, I can't get behind that.
Right.
But parents who also like, you have to eat this many bites, you can only eat these foods, I'm never going to introduce any unhealthy food, whatever they think is unhealthy, like totally controlling. Those parents also have the same health risks as the other families, right?
Yeah.
So really, neither the highly permissive nor the highly authoritarian approach, or even there's a new form of parenting that I've seen in the literature, kind of like overprotective, which they group with authoritarian, where the parents are so concerned about a child being healthy that they control every aspect of their health. None of those three are associated with the best health outcomes. So instead, we kind of look for this middle ground of what is your job as the parent, and what is your child's job? Your child is really in control of their body. Like, how much am I going to eat? Am I going to eat what's available? We also want this to be in an environment where, as parents, we are being responsive to our kids. Like, when my kids are like, Mommy, I really want ice cream. Ice cream may not be on the menu today, and that's fine. And I can say that, ice cream isn't on the menu, but I know that you want it. So we'll get some at the store. We'll put it on the menu for next week.
Love that.
Or, we always have it in the freezer. So, so it's like, well, maybe we'll have it on Friday or whatever day we're going to have it. But I think it's important for us to listen to these desires that kids have and to find a way to incorporate them into our families in a way that works for our families and our values.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's where your language, guys, if you're not following Jennifer on Instagram, definitely go follow her. Her name is kids.eat.incolor. It's amazing. And I think that's what really drew me to your page, is just like learning how to speak to your kids rather than just being like, oh yeah, sure, go get it. Or no, you can't have it. It's acknowledging what they said, responding back to them, and then just giving them a reason why without it being so convoluted and like, oh no, maybe not. And also the indecisiveness, the maybe, and then like letting them like push you to eventually say yes.
That's
really hard. That's really hard. And I struggle with that because I'm actually, I mean, I would, you know, I'm basically like a stepmom. So, you know, it's not my own daughter but she's with us 50% of the time. And I get really caught up in that where I'm like, where's my role? Like, am I allowed, like, I don't want her to have any issues with food. So like, I can be a little bit more too freeing. And then I'm like, well, no, not right now. Cause like dinner's in a little bit or stuff like that. And then there's sometimes where she'll just ask. And then I'm like, okay, like I you know, I'm going to be honest with that. Like it can be hard. So I think that the in between and like the not so, I guess like where they know that they can like kind of get to you.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to be careful about that too.
Right. Sure. That's one of the reasons. And I go over this in my free picky eater guide, where I kind of talk about the you know, the job of the parent versus the job of the child is, you know, having an eating routine can really take a lot of those battles away because it's already decided. Like, yeah, you'll battle it out with your kid at the beginning when you make a change and they don't like it, which is 100% understandable. Like who likes change? But, you know, once you establish that eating routine of, you know, we eat breakfast, we eat that snack, we eat lunch, there's a snack in the afternoon, and, you know, and of course it's going to look different. Your routine is going to look different for every single family. And there's going to be different phases of routines as your child is growing over time. But once it's kind of set, like my kids will be like, what's for afternoon snack? Like they know there's going to be an afternoon snack. And then it's like, you know, what's dinner? What's bedtime snack going to be? Like all these things are kind of set out so they know when the eating opportunities are. And, you know, sometimes that can take a while for them to figure that out when you're initially implementing it. But once it's set up, it takes a lot. It makes it easier for you to implement. Like we've always had this rule at the table or in the kitchen for eating. So do my kids test that rule? Absolutely. They test it all the time. But I've been implementing this rule for, you know, 6.5 years, probably when my kid was 1, we implemented it. And so it's just kind of like, I have 6.5 years of practice saying, take your food out of the living room and put it in the kitchen. So it's not as hard for me to implement. So the more you do this, the easier it becomes.
And then they have that expectation. It's like when you tell your kid to hang up their coat, and if you tell them it's okay to hang up your coat sometimes, no, it's not okay to hang up your coat sometimes, you're kind of like indecisive. But if you're always like, hang up your coat, they're not going to be surprised when it's not hung up and you're telling them to hang up your coat, right? So at least there's like they know the expectation. One time you posted something about like I guess like how much could, like for younger kids, like the expectation of like how long they should sit to eat. Cause like I said, now, you know, my boyfriend and his daughter, she's almost 5, but I met her when she was like 2 going on 3, like she just doesn't sit still. Like she's getting better at it as she gets older, but like getting her to just sit and finish her food, I was like, that's like a whole to do. So like, what are the expectations based off of age and sitting and like, what should we be like? You know, I think, just go from there. Cause I think there's a lot.
Ideally, we want to work toward the goal of 10 to 15 minutes. Now, I have 2 incredibly energetic boys, especially for the first one, like sitting was not his preferred activity, period. So my job was, how long can I get my toddler to sit at the table within his age-appropriate attention span? Now, when I start training a kid to sit at the table, I start with 1 minute usually, or 1 to 2 minutes per year of age. Now I started kind of working with my son when he was 1. So we just started with 1. We used a sound timer. Okay, we're going to sit at the table until the timer goes off. He was 1, he could sit for 1 minute. And when I mean sit for 1 minute, I mean like once you put him in the seat, the time starts. So the food has to be there, everything has to be ready, all that stuff. So the kid gets in there. I don't let him get out until that timer goes off. That was 60 seconds though. We could manage that. And so he starts to learn, oh, I will sit until the timer goes off. And then slowly every day you can increase that 30 seconds or 1 minute or 2 minutes or whatever works for your kid until you find their maximum attention span. Now with my son, I looked to see like what what was his maximum attention span? Like when he looked at books, how long did he look at books? When he colored, how long did he color? And so, you know, for my toddler, 4 or 5 minutes was about his attention span. So I couldn't expect more than that for a meal. Mm-hmm. Here's your food. I got my 5 minutes. Everything has to be ready so that we get the most out of those 5 minutes. And then as soon as he's done, he's out of there. Now, as soon as he got a little older, we were able to work up to 15 minutes, which was a real accomplishment for our family. So and my other kid was able to sit for a little longer. So he kind of grew right into that 12 to 15 minute attention span just fine. Mm-hmm. And then we got a visual timer. So it's like an hourglass where the kids could see, I'm going to sit until the span runs out and then I can get down.
Oh, that's a good idea. I never thought about that.
But yeah, usually if you have an active kid, the expectations for sitting should be age appropriate. You can't expect a 2-year-old active child to sit for 30 minutes.
Right.
I mean, you just can't.
Yeah, no, definitely. Oh my God, there's just so much good information here. I guess one thing that just came up, what about if to help a child maybe sit a little bit longer, someone maybe puts on like a YouTube video or a TV? What are your thoughts on eating while watching something?
I highly recommend just not doing that. Now, if you're already in that position, never fear, you can always make changes. There's always ways to wean them off the screen. And I talk a little bit about that in the Picky Eater Guide too. We got to get the kids off the screen though, because if a screen is on, they can't listen to their body cues and they actually can't really interact with the food, which then leads to picky eating. So in my Better Bites program, which is the program for picky eaters or families of picky eaters, I have a lot of families come in where the only way they can get their child to eat is with a screen.
Right.
And I get it. I understand exactly why parents do it, because all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, I can actually get my kid to eat. The problem is they're not getting any of the sensory experience, the touch, the smell, the feel, the look. Right. They're not getting the modeling from you. Right. They're not even smelling, because when they're watching the screen, their brains are turned off. Right. And they're also not getting any of the social interaction, none of the verbal skills at the table. So I highly recommend weaning off of that screen and not even starting it as quickly as possible. Now, again, we're in a pandemic. A lot of people are not following best practices, myself included, in order to survive this time. So there's never any judgment here. But when you have the capacity and you want to work on the picky eating, you want to work on the better eating, and now that is the time. One of the first best things you can do is wean right off that screen.
Okay. Now, this just came up to my thought. What about the language? When you're done eating, you can how can you use screen time as a reward? Like, how does I get?
Yeah, I highly recommend not using a reward in association with eating.
Yeah.
It's just, I think a lot of us grew up in an era where we were rewarded with food a lot, where we were kind of, food is like always the reward, or it was like, well, eat your dinner to do X, Y, Z and to get this and to get that. What that does is it really messes up our ability to listen to our internal cues for what they are. Because you know what, if my kid has eaten and half their food is still there, but they're full, you want them to stop.
Right.
Because they're going into a world where if they go to a restaurant, they may be served 2 or 3 portions of food, like, something that a very large person, a 6'4" guy might eat and need. I actually don't. And so I need that skill to be able to say, oh, you know what, I'm full. Can I get a box to take the rest of it? I need that skill, and I need a lot of practice with that and confidence in what my body is saying. So I actually want my kids to feel free to say, you know what, I'm full. And then maybe I take the food, or, we save it for later, whatever. But we really need our kids to be able to listen to their body without introducing external things. Like, when you finish your dinner, then you can watch the show. Well, of course they're going to finish their dinner, even if they, even if they're full already. So I just really, really want to see us moving toward more of this true pressure-free. Like,
right.
no, you don't
Right.
have to eat it. But also, if you want more, you can have it, right?
Right.
They're
Right.
deciding whether they're eating and how much.
Right. I love that. I love that. Oh, this is so good. So good. So you mentioned your picky eater guide. Do you maybe want to share a little bit more about what's in there and how people can get access to that?
Sure. So the free picky eater guide is all over kidseatincolor.com and also at bit.ly.com/tryitguide. But kidseatincolor.com is probably easier to find. But it's great. It's 14 pages of really useful information, step-by-step how to help your kids sit at the table. This difference between, you allowing your child to choose what they eat, but also you as the parent maintaining the environment. And it kind of like walks through that also, how to know if you have an extreme picky eater versus just more of a typical picky eater, and kind of strategies for exposure and things like that. So it's been helpful to so many parents.
I'm sure. I mean, just this conversation, I know a lot of people are going to get a lot out of it. So that guide is probably even more in depth and in detail. So definitely, guys, go follow Jennifer on Instagram, Kids Eat in Color, or go to her website. I will link both in the show notes, and definitely get your free picky eater guide. Jennifer, is there any last minute tips, comments, suggestions that you have for our listeners before we wrap up today?
I just always like to encourage parents that they're doing a great job, even if things seem really stressful right now, or you feel like, oh my gosh, there's so many things that I could do to make this better. It's okay to take a break and say, it's okay right now. And I'll keep these in mind for when I have the capacity to try them out later. It's okay to take that space, especially in the pandemic. And, people may listen, not during the pandemic, I hope. But it's important to realize that there are times to make changes with our kids, and there's times to just say, okay, things are okay, and I'm going to keep these for when I have more capacity, and then I'll implement them.
Yeah, I love that. And I think with that, there could be many things, just like in our own individualized nutrition plan or healthy wellness or lifestyle plan. There's so many components to that, right? There's hydration, there's sleep, there's stress management, there's movement. If you try to fix it all in a day or in a month or even in a year, it's going to take a lot of work. So focus on one small thing. If it's the screen time, focus on that. Don't worry about all that other stuff.
Right.
Or if, just pick one or two things. And I think that's that's so encouraging. And I hope people really realize that they don't need to do it all, tomorrow.
Right.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. This was awesome. Guys, definitely give Jennifer a follow. If you're not already subscribed to the Tips with Toni podcast, definitely hit that subscribe button. It'll notify you when a new episode comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you enjoyed this episode, take a screenshot of it, share it on your story, tag me at tips_with_Toni, tag Jennifer, and share it with a friend, with a loved one, parent, somebody that you think is going to benefit from this. Definitely share it with them. All right, guys, that is it for me today. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Toni Marinucci, your registered dietitian, helping you get healthy one bite at a time.